So right here we have a bit of yellow, and that's going to represent the sun. Then here we're going to do this little bit with like a little bit of spiky bits, and that's grass. But you can put everything to your imagination. It can be whatever you want to be. You can be whatever you want to be. Yeah, so you could paint, yeah, this could be water. We're going to do a little bit of blue here. Hey, it could be waves. It could be maybe like a tsunami if you want. Yeah. So whatever you want to paint, however you want to color, that works out okay. Because that's art, and that's perception, and that's your perception, and that's what matters. And you can be totally artistic. You could be Arto, and you can paint and do things the way you want to. So your goal is to restore life to these desaturated and black and white, basic comic book style lands in Arto. And that's the summary of the story. It gets a little bit more complicated than that. Something to do with gods. I don't think it really matters, unless you're a lore lover, I guess. And yeah, so it's a neat little game. I think it's running off of Unity, of course, before everyone jumped away from Unity because of the royalties. But that's another story for another day. So the main character is this like sword, like paint wielding killer brought to life by a dying god to save the dying world. I think that's really all you need to know about the story. It's not really any more complicated than that. So you learn these multiple spells. I didn't even get that far, let's be honest, to fight against this colorless world. And there's 6 different stages, but they all have their own design, which I thought was really cool. They all look like vaguely similar, because otherwise, feel like you're not playing the same game. But yeah, so you mostly run around and you watch the black and white world around you come to life with vibrant, the rainbow colors. All the colors of the rainbow, I mean. So there's 6 unique art styles, as I said. So the game changes as you progress. And the game really feels like an indirect sequel or homage to Okami. I don't know, I didn't see any reference to that, just that's the vibe. It's an interesting concept, but it isn't totally original, although it's done well enough. I wouldn't say it's done superb well. Is that even very well? But it's a fun hack and slash gameplay. I feel like maybe some of the concepts from what I've read, there's a lot of text, which I find is sort of like, okay, I could do without this. If it's going to be a hack and slash, let's do the hack and slash. If we're going to do lore, we'll do lore. And you can't bypass it. It's not like Diablo. But I feel like this is like a kid's version of Diablo. Almost like, hey, my kid wants to play Diablo, but anyways, this is more suitable. So yeah, the fighting is fast. It's fairly furious as well. The controls are tight, but I feel like the dodging is very tricky. Like you really have to get the rhythm of, okay, attack, attack. Okay, I gotta jump right away, because the game demands really good reflexes. And I have to admit, Donkey Kong Country 2, back in the day, my reflexes were like, because they had to be to get through some of the, and unlock some of that stuff. You had to be able to jump on the dime. Like you had maybe like 10-15 frames, I'd guess. Maybe not, maybe 30, 25, whatever. But yeah, so this is like the type of game that it's designed that you have to be very quick, otherwise you're gonna get whacked, and you only have a few hearts to survive. Well, that's great, but like it's just very punishing, the boss battles, compared to the enemies in the everyday part of the game. So yes, games have mostly moved away from that, because just most people, some people enjoy that, but most people don't enjoy like just sort of like on the dime dodging and fighting. And Devil May Cry, Souls-likes, whatever. So yeah, the enemies aren't really challenging. I mean, you could dodge, but you get away without it. But the bosses, totally different story. So what doesn't help is there's also like frame drops. I didn't get crashing. I don't recall getting crashing, but apparently some people had. And there's low frame rates that just come out of nowhere. And there are constant fights that kind of get repetitive. So you can have the most interesting story, but if you're bogged down by like, hey, I have to fight 20 guys and then I get a little blurb about, you know, that's not really essential to the story. Like someone saying, oh, you know, this world is dying. It's like, well, yeah, I can see that. Or something else like, oh, it looks horrible outside today. You know, something like that where it's like, well, I just fought 20 enemies just to hear something that's like, doesn't really add to the lore. I don't know, that's what I felt about the text so far. So anyways, the boss's fights are extremely unbalanced, and I went and fought the boss. I'm a pretty patient person, so, you know, I would say in the other side of the spectrum in terms of patient. I'm sure a lot of people would not be as patient. So I tried to fight the boss like at least a dozen times. I just stopped there. There was just too much precision involved that feels like it should be a casual game. And I feel like this is like where this game unfortunately fails, because it's not being polished. There's not being any updates to the game. Yeah, so it requires lightning quick reflexes, extreme patience, and it's just, if you can't get through the first level, how are you going to enjoy the art from the other levels and enjoy the story? So it's one of those games, unfortunately, that unless you're really determined to beat the first level, which I assume lets you save after, I hope so, not all games do, I just feel like it's a great concept, but it's just not handled in a fun and universally appealing way like Epic Mickey 1 or 2, which, you know, sort of encourages everyone to play and sort of has very polished, I mean, it has rough edges, kind of like Arto, but like at least people can progress and still achieve things. And I feel like because you're locked behind the boss battles being so much more tougher than the enemy fights, you're kind of skewering the audience, and you're only going to get the really hardcore to beat it. So the game goes for $25.99. Okay, that's fair. You know, there's obviously a lot of effort done and put into this. It's just a real shame the game isn't more polished with the dodging mechanics, especially the boss difficulty and optimization. I don't think there was a difficulty mode from what I remember, but that would help. It just feels like a 6 or 6.5 game to me. Just so much promise. It's sad when you see a game like this where there's so much promise, but it's just, you know, that extra bit of work. And this happens, I feel like it happens to a lot of games, because it's so much work to make a game, but it's just, there's a few flaws that if someone sat down and said to the like maybe the tester said, hey, you know, this is not going to fly with, you know, the mass audience, then maybe they would make these, tinker the game more. But yeah, it could have been so much better. It could have been 8 out of 10. There's so much potential, but the problem is at the end of the day, the potential doesn't matter if you don't actually have it polished to that level. So yeah, with more attention to its issues. So if you're willing to forgive Arto's flaws, it really looks cool with the paint style. The concept is kind of old. I've seen it done a few times, the whole black and white and then color, or just black and white graphics. It's been around for like especially I'd say in the last decade or two, you start to see or have seen more people trying to do that contrast, because it really stands out when you walk by and see a game like that. But you know, it could be a rewarding experience as it exists. It's just a great idea that I feel like it wasn't executed to that last 20% that made a game from okay to, hey, this is really, really cool. And it worked for some people. I just feel like, you know, it's not going to appeal to a lot of people because of the challenge with the bosses. So, and even going back to Smurf Kart, you know, it needs that extra 30-40% voices. Same problem as Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl 1, where the characters don't react, so it's less thrilling because you don't feel like you're in the middle of the action. And here it's like you want to be in the action, but the bosses are so hard, so you can't progress with the story and get immersed. So yeah, it just wasn't fully executed into amazing polished product. So keep on restoring color to a desaturated world and keep on gaming. I'll see you soon. Bye.